All right, welcome to my show. I said, welcome to my show. Yeah, welcome to my show. Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, sirenamedicina, and today we're going to be exploring the senses. I would like to remind you of your sovereignty in this moment before we actually dive into this topic. You have every right to take whatever information is right for you, and you don't have to take anything that I say as truth. We are merely just exploring concepts and just shit talking with each other. Because I can talk a lot of shit. In saying that, I have gotten this information from Rudolf Steiner, who's the founder of Waldorf Education. And these are Steiner schools that are run worldwide. And I think the concepts are absolutely brilliant. And it really does give me a lot of faith in humanity, that if the children are being educated in this way, that it's just like, who knows what those future generations are going to be like. Get your popcorn ready, because this is going to be a good one. So instead of thinking of us having 5 senses, the idea is that we have 12 senses. Now, disclaimer here, I am not a Steiner teacher at all. I have not studied anything to do with Steiner. I am just simply deeply interested in the idea of having 12 senses. So I'll do my best to explain this as best I can, but in saying that, I always encourage you to find your own information on these types of things and do your own research and come to your own conclusions with the things that you learn or take in and any kind of information that you receive. So let's take a breath. Yeah, that was good. All right. So we understand that we have 5 senses. That's the most common ones that our planet Earth and people and our society have made us focus on, which is our sense of smell, taste, sight, hearing, and touch. I feel like we are a little bit overly focused on these 5. So I would like to introduce the rest of you to you. And isn't that funny, huh? Isn't that funny that in our society we are taught to be focused on 5 main senses, meaning we don't actually fully develop the rest of our senses? There's like 7 of them just hanging around waiting for us to become aware of them. I mean, like, we use them, but we're not aware of how we actually use them. So I know that maybe many of you have heard that thought is a 6th sense, like originating from the 6th chakra, with the 3rd eye chakra in your brain. But thought being a sense, it's like, what does that actually mean? Well, we'll get deeper into that soon. Let's explore each sense as if it were on a wheel starting from 1 to 12. 1 being the touch sense. Our touch sense is our sense of innocence, like inner sense or innocence or innocence. And basically it helps us distinguish where we end and the world around us begins. It develops our sense of self, because when we can touch something, we can feel it outside of ourselves, or we can feel inside of ourselves. We can't really touch our insides, but the physical touch gives us the signal that this is the edge of our boundary or self. And once we have developed our sense of touch through our parents touching us or being able to touch our parents as babies, this develops how we see ourselves and how we experience our own physical bodies by knowing how they touch us and how the energy that they're sharing with us when our parents touch us tells us a lot about who we are and what is allowed and not allowed in our bodies, and what is loving and not loving, and whether we actually deserve love or not. From my perspective, this greatly develops our sense of worth and our sense of having a right over our own bodies. And anything outside of us that we touch influences our inner state of being. So that's what I mean by the way that our parents touch us as babies tells us who we are as beings on this planet. The next sense, the second one, is the sense of life. Now, life means our own inner sense to be able to sense our own inner health and inner condition, like what is happening inside of our body. What is our perception of inside senses? Like, can we tell when our body is tired? Can we tell when we're frustrated? Can we tell when we're happy? And that all is developing, and that's our sense of life, the life that comes from within, as well as the life that we may receive from others. But mainly it is referring to our life and the condition in which we can use and enjoy and experience our life and our life force within. Now, the way that our parents or adult figures that were around us in our environment growing up, and the way that they interacted with their own sense of life deeply explains to us, or programs in us, basically, that's the more accurate term, it programs us with the understanding of how things are meant to be. Because if they're doing it this way, they're the gods, they're the elder, they're the ones who take care of us, so they must know best. Therefore, I need to do as they do and say as they say and be as they are. And I mean, that's obviously not how we really want to be unless you have really great, amazing parents. But, that does give us a huge reference on what life is actually like. And if your parents aren't really having a good time in life, it's like, what is going to tell you to kind of have a different reference? What's going to tell you that you can have a better life or enjoy life? And this leads on to our third sense, which is movement, and our sense of our own movement or our own proprioception. So even before we're actually physically born, and when we're in the womb, we are taking in the movements that our mother does as well. So when we're in the womb and she's moving around, the way that she moves and the way that her nervous system is wired tells us so much about the world and what to expect, so to speak. Our ability to move also, for me, in my perception, relates very much to our freedom. How freely can you actually move in your body? And it comes again down to the nervous system, because it is very well known that tension in the body actually doesn't come from tension in the muscles. It comes from tension in the nervous system, meaning whatever perceptions or wiring or experiences that the mind is holding on to is what's circulating through the system. Because if you had to put someone on anesthesia, you'd be able to put their leg behind their head, and as soon as they wake up, the tension comes back. So that sense of movement tells us, how does this world work? How do I move through this world? How do I use this touch from the sense of self to sense my life that's going on within me? And how do I move that life through me? Which leads on to the fourth sense, which is the sense of balance. We develop our sense of balance through rolling and crawling and struggling to learn how to walk. And that balance also will directly mirror in our reality later on in life. When we are able to have balance in the physical body, we are also able to have balance in our energetic body and our reality. And these four senses that we've just talked about are a part of what we call the lower senses, or the physical or inner senses. The fifth sense is our sense of smell, which is a part of our normal five senses. And this is part of the boundary between our inner and outer world. So we use this to distinguish what's going on or discern what's going on in our outer reality by taking it into ourselves. And so is the next sense, which is the sixth sense. Obviously not our sixth sense, but the sixth one on this list of the taste sense. And the taste sense, as well as the seventh one, which is the vision sense as well, it does the same thing. It's our boundary to the outer world. It's how we take in our outer world and put it into our inner being, and we're able to discern and make decisions of our reality from there. And the eighth sense is the warmth sense. This is not the same as touch. This is a bit different. It's like still part of the margin between our inner and outer world. So these four, the smell, taste, vision, and warmth, vision being our sight, those four senses are what we distinguish in the middle part of ours. So it's like our middle range senses, because they are basically in the middle of our inner and outer realities. Our ninth sense is the sense of hearing, which is also like the five senses. It distinguishes our inner and outer self, so we get to see that, but it's not part of the middle senses. It's actually part of the higher or outer senses, because it is an ability to be able to hear our inner self too, or to hear the higher guidance that is available to us. The next sense is the 10th one, which is the sense of language. And that encompasses everything that would be in the language. So like the hearing and perceiving of language and being able to speak and to read. And this is in human history, it's one of our most outstanding features. But I'll get into a little bit later on how that can actually be limiting, because as I've mentioned before, that language is actually just a code. It's a code to move through this reality. It is a form of creation, because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. So being able to make sound and speak is to speak things into reality. Now, I know I swear a lot and I say a lot of shit. Every bit of word, everything you say does create reality. So yeah, I'm very aware of these things. But, I feel like when you have that awareness of it, it does take away the charge, because you can direct that charge where you would like it to go. And every word is our intention, which will lead straight into the 11th sense, which is the sense of our concept or thought. So it's our ability to perceive thoughts. That's what thoughts are. It's not like we can create them, but we don't really actually create thoughts. We perceive the thoughts that are within or outside of us. So that leads into the last sense, which is the ego sense. So this doesn't refer to the development of one's own ego. It's actually our ability to sense another person's ego or presence. For example, if someone has walked into the room, you can sense them maybe before they even walk into the room. And now it really gets interesting, because each sense actually relates to another sense, and it relates to the development of that sense. So remember, I said that we had the lower senses, which were our physical and inner senses, and we also have the middle ones, as well as the higher or outer senses. And the lower senses relate to each outer sense. For example, our first sense of touch develops our ego. So it develops by being able to be touched by others. We eventually develop the ability to perceive others fully. So you can see how, as with our egos, we can project stuff onto others or have things projected onto us. And that is because our sense of touch also develops our sense of self, our idea of who we are and how we are in this world. And our sense of self is also our boundaries. So when we have boundaries, that is our sense of self. For example, I like dogs, you like cats. That's a boundary. I'm not going to try and convince you or pull you away from the thing that you like or force upon you things that you don't want. You know what I mean? That's a very basic way of talking about it, but anyway. And let's carry on. So the second part, our life sense, develops into our concept sense or our thought sense. So how we perceive life and how we perceive the thoughts of life. And when I say thoughts of life, I mean the life or the energy that is floating around us in the atmosphere that is thought energy, potential energy waiting to be actualized and realized within us. And that is life. It's waiting to be, like that potential of life is waiting to be actualized and realized within us so that we can target it or move towards things that we want to create in our reality. Our sense of movement develops into our sense of language. So if you had to think about the way that we move in the world is when if you watch kids, they kind of move around and do mannerisms and things like their parents. And that tells them who they are. They may begin to move in the direction of a certain book and then begin to read the book, which is all movement, and that will develop their language about themselves. And the way that we are spoken to and the way that our parents moved around us tells us exactly who we are. And that's how we think and kind of create ourselves through that. And our sense of balance develops our sense of hearing. Like, do we have a balance between listening to ourselves and listening to the messages that come through in the outer world? And isn't that funny that when your hearing is, if your hearing is blocked or if you have problems with your inner ears, your balance is thrown off. And you can see how that's all so intricately connected and how we as human beings have kind of lost touch with our senses. And I know that, most of these spiritual teachings that go around are all to do with withdrawal of the senses, like in yoga, something called pratyahara, which means sense withdrawal. And that's to kind of tap into that inner self, the inner spirit. And these are all relating to our physical body and our physical being on this planet. And these senses help us to discern our reality and our environment, and then from there be able to adapt and create new all the time. And when we are unconscious of these and we don't see them as senses, we kind of feel like shit just happens to us. It makes us sort of feel like we're not in control of our reality, but we can actually create and control our reality. Obviously it's a greater sense that you can't control everything. But I feel that as though if we are able to use these senses in a much more aware state, we can actually begin to really shift things in our reality, to see thought as just a sense that you're just sensing words or vibrations in the atmosphere, meaning you don't even have to identify with anything that you think. But you can, if that's, you can even let go of things, and you can identify with things that are much better for you, like where you want to go. Do you fully identify as the person that you want to be, or, you are already the person that you want to be, but say you want to create a business, or you want to help a lot of people, or you want to live on land, or whatever the hell you want to do. You have to be able to identify with that thought and actualize it within your being. Now, isn't it really funny that Some people say, just use your common sense. What is your most common sense? I feel like in this, like, yeah, like really, what is your most common sense? Do you know? Because I don't really know. But, to maybe the most common sense is to, like, common, I like to break down words a lot. So common, community, communicate. The most common sense, meaning the all senses to one. Using all of your senses to make a discerning decision. That sounds like a really hard job if you've never been taught how to use your senses, but here we are. We're learning, we're growing every day, we're breaking through our shit, and we got this, humans. We've got this, people. Yeah, I believe in us. We can definitely develop these senses in ourselves and develop an awareness to really live the kind of life we want to live. And if you have children, to really become aware of these senses that are developing within them. So tap into your inner sense and come into a place of being in no sense so that you can understand your innocence. And I'll leave you there with that today. I hope you have a lovely week.